Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, PMI CP Certification Explained, Boost Your Construction Career, presented by Head of Management Solutions at Educate 360, Brent Nair. My name is Mariela Salinas, and I'll be assisting and moderating our session today. We are in Zoom for today's webinar, and we will be sharing a copy of this recording with you in an email after the session. We do encourage participation throughout the session, so please use the chat or that Q&A option for our short Q&A after the presentation. Educate 360 is so excited to present this webinar today. So without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Brent.
Thanks, Mariella. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I hope you all had a great weekend and an even better start to your Monday. As Mariella mentioned, my name is Brent Nair, and I am the Head of Management Solutions here at Educate 360. And I am so excited to talk about the PMI Construction Professional or PMI CP exam. This is going to be a great informative session about this new certification for PMI, or I should say fairly new. It's been out now for about 6 months or so. And last time I checked, I think we're up to a little under 1,000 people now worldwide who have the PMI CP certification. So a little bit about today, what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about, of course, the intro, which we're in right now. We'll talk about the exam structure and content. And then specifically, we'll talk about the 4 domains that are going to be covered in the PMI CP exam. And then lastly, we'll have your questions and answers. As I mentioned, this exam is a little over 6 months old. And quite frankly, it's long overdue from PMI. We've had PMI exams, of course, around Agile, Scrum, or certifications around Agile, Scrum, of course, the main PMP, but not one that focused on construction. We see a lot of project managers today that have their PMP like I do, and then decided, I spent a lot of time building data centers, doing office renovations, other type construction type projects. And when this came out, and PMI started to build this, we were very excited about it because it gave us a little bit more concentration around construction, which is its own different type of project, has its own challenges, especially around the areas of interface management and other things. So with that, let's talk a little bit about the exam, because I'm sure that's why a lot of you are here today, is to find out a little bit more about the exam. So the exam itself is, of course, 120 questions. And as with all PMI exams, there's a right way, a wrong way, and the PMI way to answer the questions. And as you're studying and preparing for the exam, one of the best things to keep in the back of your mind is to remember, how would PMI want me to answer this question? I may do something differently on my construction projects. That's not important to PMI. They want to make sure that everyone has the same standard across the board. And as such, they're looking for specific answers to the questions. So as you go through the material and start building your knowledge base, keep in mind how PMI wants me to answer this question. Now, the exam was developed, or why was this exam developed? Really, because PMI saw a short, I don't say area, but a need. They identified a gap. And of course, that because we have a lot of construction professionals that are certified with the PMP certification, and they were saying, we love the PMP certification, process, procedure, talking about all of those elements. However, we're missing some of the components that we deal with day in and day out, from construction and construction needs. And so that's really how it differs from the other PMI certifications. The construction professional certification is concentrated on certain areas. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to go ahead now and move into those domains that we mentioned earlier. So this will help kind of solidify a little bit what I'm talking about when I say the differences around the PMI CP exam. As I mentioned, 120 questions, 230 minutes. There's 4 domains: contracts, strategy and scope, stakeholder management, and project governance. If you're already, if you've already taken a PMI exam in the past, very familiar with stakeholder engagement, the types of questions that everyone that they've asked previously around stakeholder engagement applies here, and the same for project governance. However, there's a lot more emphasis placed on contract management as well as the tools and techniques that we use in construction projects for strategy and scope management. And I'll get into that in a little bit. So if we were to take all of those 120 questions, this is how it's broken out. 50% of the questions are in the first domain. 30% of the questions are in the second domain, and I'll show you how those numbers relate to the domains. 15% in the third domain, of course, and 5% in the fourth domain, which is project governance. So as we think about that, keep in mind that PMI, regardless of the exam, never publishes how many questions you have to get right to pass an exam. So in other words, if half of the 120 questions, which is 60, are related to domain 1, they don't say you have to get 40 or 30 or 42 questions correct. They just let you know that you passed, and they'll tell you you are above target, on target, needs improvement, or missed target. So they'll in that type of phrasing. So let's talk about each of the domains and how they relates to this, and to help you a little bit prepare. So domain 1, primarily around contracts management. Now, within contracts management, we're going to be looking at 3 main topics: risk management and assessment, claims process management, and contract lifecycle management. And when I mention risk management and assessment, what I am talking about is how risky is this project? Where are the risk elements? What do I need to look for? What do I need to do from a risk perspective to make sure I'm mitigating, I'm transferring, I'm accepting, maybe even avoiding a risk if possible? So anything that if you've taken a PMP exam, you'll have a good understanding of risk management. If not, make sure that when you study, when you go through, and hopefully, you'll be able to take a PMI CP exam prep course. Ours will be released this summer. So looking forward to seeing you all that are attending, hopefully in one of our classes. As you move forward, think about claims process management. If I have an issue, if we have an issue, what do we do? And when we say claims process management, it might be an insurance claim. It might be a contract issue. We might have a disagreement. How do we handle this disagreement on our contract? Maybe you have a supplier that's delivering something late. PMI majority of the questions are going to be scenario based. PMI will give you a scenario and say, in this situation, the following has occurred or the following is happening. How would you respond, or what would be the best course of action, or what would you do first? Those are all questions that they'll ask in the scenario. And they'll give you 4 choices. And you'll pick one of the 4 that is the best. Now, unfortunately, some of them will be close, and you'll have to decide. So any standard test-taking strategies that you may have, keep that in mind as you take this exam. They're going to be asking you which one is the best. Usually out of the 4 answers, you can easily disregard or strike through. You have the ability to strike through on the exam, at least 2 of them. So that means now that you're left with 2 choices. And which one of these 2 would be the best choice according to PMI? Keep that in mind as you're answering the questions. How do we handle the claims process? Now, the third one is the contract lifecycle management. What do you do from beginning of the project all the way through to the end of the contract? How do you close a contract? How do you bid a contract? Are you familiar with the RFP or RFQ, request for proposal or request for quotes or request for information? Any one of those foundational types of beginning stages of a contract. What happens if you need to adjudicate or have an issue with the contract? How do you process a claim so they'll tie in together? So domain 1 is all related to contracts management. Domain 2, stakeholder engagement. How do we manage a stakeholder? Who are our stakeholders? How do we identify our stakeholders? What are those ways that we find out who we're working with, who we're helping, who's our customer, so to speak? Keep in mind that you, as the project manager, you're a stakeholder already. So keep that in mind. So what are the ways that we do it? You'll hear things like potentially in this section, as well as in the project communication section, how does the team work together? How do you work with your subcontractors? Do you do things like big room planning, otherwise known as OBAYA or OBEA, depending upon how you pronounce it? Do you practice active listening? How do we prevent issues? How do we be proactive? How do we use things such as, in this case, what are our risks around stakeholder? How do we do things like the PRI? How do we identify those elements? So keep in mind stakeholder engagement. Communications are a big part of this as well. Oops, sorry. So back to stakeholder engagement. How do we get commitment-based management? How do we work with that process? That'll also be part of it. That falls under project communication, as well as how do we use the Compass diagnostic tool for communication? Those are all elements that will be lumped into stakeholder engagement. Strategy and scope management. How do we know what it is that we're doing? How do we handle changes to that? Remember, do not approve or do not make any changes unless they've gone through the change approval process. What is your change approval process? How do you go about that? What are your interface points? Thinking about your built environment. Where are your interface points? What makes a good interface? And that's talking about the scope. Thinking about my project overall. What happens if something is delayed? What happens if I have an issue with a vendor or subcontractor? How do I look at value engineering? What are the elements of value engineering? PMI wants you to answer that. PMI is looking for, hey, when we do value engineering, we're looking at alternative approaches that are going to save our stakeholders, save our customers dollars, as well as maybe time. What do we need to do to manage that scope? What happens if we're being delayed? How do we communicate those delays? What are the tools you use to communicate those delays? All of those are elements of the components of strategy and scope management. How do you use a project management information system? Do you use one that's specific for construction projects? Can you use Microsoft Project? The answer is yes, you can. The point is, from PMI's perspective, they don't necessarily care which brand of project management information system that you use. They care that you use one. So you have a central repository for all of your information. You use that to manage your scope. You put together your Gantt chart. You put together your schedule. All of those components are part of it. You also, excuse me, you can also use that for your project communication. And domain 4 is governance. How do you govern your project? What do you do if you need to escalate as the project manager? How do you go about handling those components? So from a governance perspective, we're looking at what are your structures and practices. Do you have pre-built governance? What is that governance? Are you looking for elements that allow change orders, part of governance? What are the tools and techniques that you use for governance? And not only governance related to the project mechanics itself, but how about governance related to communication? How about governance related to stakeholder management? All of those are elements that are built in to the PMI CP materials and in the exam. So those are the tools and techniques that we think about. So those are the 4 elements of project governance. Now, keep in mind, let's go back to here. So 5% of the sections, or 5% of the 120 questions, are related to governance. 15% of the questions are related to strategy and scope. So we look at this, 80% of the questions for the exam are related to contracts management and stakeholder engagement. So there's a lot in there. Keep that in mind as you prepare for the exam. Couple of things about eligibility. As you prepare for the exam, you have to have 3 years, apologize for that, should say 3 years of on-the-job experience in construction or environment or built environment projects. Doesn't mean you necessarily have to have the title project manager. Your title could be associate project manager, could be project lead, could be construction foreman, whatever the case may be. You just have to show 3 years of on-the-job experience. And that 3 years has to be within the last 10 years. It doesn't have to be 36 months consecutive. You could have 18 months and then a 2-month break, and then picked up another 6-month contract or another 6-month job or another 24-month job, whatever, however it needs to be. It just has to be 3 years of on-the-job experience in the last 10 years. You also have to have professional learning related to PMI. So PMI offers an opportunity for you to learn through 4 course modules, and those are self-learning modules. Or you have the opportunity to do a single instructor-led training. What our PMI CP exam is going to be a 1-week boot camp. It'll be 5 days, maybe 4.5 days. Of instructor-led, and specifically it's going to be led by instructors that have had experience in the construction industry, using the tools such as the OBIA, the PRI, using the Compass diagnostic tool as it relates to construction projects. So we will be teaching with that format in mind. And again, as I mentioned, that'll be offered beginning in June, July timeframe this calendar year. If you can't wait that long or don't want to wait that long, you're welcome to go to PMI.org, look at the CP Construction Professional exam, and learn about it as well. Mariella, I think we're ready for some questions and answers. Well, at least questions. Hopefully, we'll get some answers.
Awesome, Brent. I will go ahead and allow our audience to kind of ruminate on a couple questions, give you a minute to throw any last minute questions or feedback into the chat. And just as a reminder, you will absolutely be receiving this recording in an email after the webinar, just in case you weren't able to view the entire session. Awesome. I had a quick question here in the Q&A. What is the biggest difference between the PMI CP certification and the PMP certification?
The biggest difference between the two is the fact that it is industry specific. So it's specific to the construction industry. In the PMP exam, we talk primarily about 3 flavors of project management: traditional or waterfall or predictive, agile or adaptive, and then hybrid, which is the combination of those two. In the PMI CP exam or construction professional exam, we focus on similar elements of stakeholder and communication and scope. However, we specify the tools used for or in the construction industry, such as the project risk interface or PRI, the Compass diagnostic tool, the interface management components. Those are specific to the construction professional exam or the CP exam. Also, is transition planning slash move management considered on the job experience? Can you explain that a little bit more, Teresa? Or let me say what I think you're asking. So let's say, for example, in Memphis, we have a organization known as Armstrong. I'm from Memphis, by the way, Armstrong Relocation, and they do relocation services for individuals and or companies. Is that what you're referencing? Okay. Um, I'm not sure if PMI would consider that as a construction role. You're not necessarily building it. Now, is part of your transition planning move office renovation or office construction? If so, then yes. Understood. Yeah, that might work. Um, I can't, some it depends upon who's the evaluator when you submit your work experience.
Awesome. Fantastic to know. We had another question come in. In
Okay.
case one already has their PMP certification, is it still mandatory to have experience in the construction industry? Great question.
Yes. So I had my PMP. I had my before taking the PMI CP exam, and I had to have specific constructions experience within the last 10 years.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And these are great questions. Thank you all so much
Oh,
for throwing them in. Yes, what's going on?
oh, I saw also Keith put, will the industry move towards the CP cert rather than the PMP? Um, I don't know if you saw that one, Mariella. But
Great
Keith,
question.
yeah, Keith, I don't think so. I think that what we're seeing is the PMP is still going to be your overarching. It's still the gold standard for project management. We saw a gap or a need for construction professional, much like we have agile certified professionals. But you have kind of, I don't, that PMP, I would say, is the overarching. I don't know if it's more important or less important than any of the others. It depends upon the industry. I think PMI is positioning itself with the CP certification to say, hey, if you're going into the construction, if you only do construction projects, this is the one for you.
Excellent, excellent. And I think I might have passed this. So sorry, Teresa, but she asked the question, do you have to get a PMP before you get a PMI CP?
No, you do not.
Perfect. Awesome. Fantastic insights today. Great. And I think that will do it for us today as well. Right on time. And just to be mindful, I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows that, that you'll absolutely be receiving a recording of this session and an email after the webinar. So thank you all so much for your fantastic questions and attendance today. And thank you so much, Brent, for all your great info.
Thank you for having me, Mariella, and I hope everyone has a great week.
Alrighty, likewise, everyone. And if you need any more info on this topic or want to learn a little bit more, please do not be afraid to visit us at projectmanagementacademy.net. Alrighty, we will start the week strong with all this great info. And if you all need any more info, again, please do not be afraid to reach out. Thank you all for attending, and thanks again, Brent.
Thank you.